Hi, I'm Dr. Kasaun Henry, and I'm reviewing a book called The Myth of Black Progress by a black sociologist called Alphonso Pinkney. This book was published in 1984, and it consists of 10 chapters. I'm going to talk about each chapter in one video. And so in this video, we're going to discuss the first chapter, which is actually the introduction. And the title of this chapter is The Persistence of Racism in the United States. In this chapter, Pinkney frames what he sees as progress. For him, black progress looks like the judicial and legislative achievements during the 1950s all the way up to the 1960s. More precisely, between 1954 and 1968. And he, in fact, starts with the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case, which for many people focus on integrating schools. But what it did, in fact, was dismantle the Plessy versus Ferguson case in 1896, which legalized Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was supposed to establish a separate but equal status quo in the United States. But we all know that in hindsight, really what happened was segregation and unequal. In other words, black people had unequal access to resources and opportunities in the United States. And all public facilities that were granted to African Americans in this country were unequal. They didn't receive their fair share of support and financial aid and such things. So, along with the Brown versus Board of Education, Pinckney identifies busing as a mechanism for progress, even the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And let's think about this. The Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were basically enforcing the 14th and 15th Amendment. So let's say the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what's significant about that, it was guaranteeing equal protection of the law for black Americans and other minority groups. And the 14th Amendment was supposed to have established that, but we know what happened. And likewise, the Voting Rights Act in 1965 was a sort of an extension or enforcement of the 15th Amendment, which establishes the right to vote for black people. Now, and if we jump to the Fair Housing Act in 1968, we will see, as far as Pinckney is concerned, another achievement for black progress. These kinds of legislative acts and judicial decisions are signs of black progress. But here's where the myth part of his book comes in. Just as soon as these decisions and acts were made, Pinckney will say that, okay, they establish equality in principle, meaning legally in the legal books, but in practice, they have not made any change because people were resisting Brown versus Board. They were resisting busing. They were resisting the Fair Housing Act. They were resisting the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and other things of the nature, and such as affirmative action, as we see today in 2023. So this leads us to the second theme in the first chapter of The Myth of Black Progress. What Pinckney does is shows how there was a dwindling of national support for the causes of the civil rights movement, black parity, black equality, equal access to the privileges of first-class citizenship. Okay, people were pushing back against this violently and legally and scholarly. And this is where the major theme in Pinckney's book comes up. So not only does he frames a resistance to what he sees as potential black progress, but he also talks about how scholars, mainly white and black social scientists, played a role in the dismantling of the very legislative and judicial acts. All right. And so in some ways, it seems as if he holds them accountable for swaying public opinion among American voters, but also influencing political representatives in their decisions to distribute resources or to pass certain laws or to reject certain laws. And one of these individuals is Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who, a political scientist, was very influential in the dismantling of the Great Society and different initiatives for black equality. So, one of the things that Daniel Patrick Moynihan did was publish The Negro Family, The Case for National Action. And in this, he frames the problem for black people. He explains or attempts to explain why black people are not getting equality and getting their fair share. And for him, it's the disintegration of the black family, the Negro family. And people jumped on this saying, the problem is not the government. The problem is not racism. The problem is the black family structure. And others join in on this bandwagon, such as the black economist Thomas Sowell, who do not see racism as an impediment to black progress. He sees it as a mere problem of culture in many ways, and the black will, the will to live, the will to succeed. And that will needs to overcome this laziness and disposition for a government dependency. Now let's go to the third major theme in chapter 1, and that is the misunderstanding of the problem. The misunderstanding of the problem among social scientists, political scientists, economists, black sociologists, all of them. And for one, it's an issue of erroneous data, misinterpretation, contradictions resulting from erroneous data and misinterpretations. And what he concludes by examining their data is that racism is still the critical factor impeding black progress. And he provides his evidence throughout the book. So that's a quick summary of this very, very important book that I hope you all take time out to read and even share some of your insights here in the comments. All right, so stay tuned for a quick overview of chapter 2 of The Myth of Black Progress by Alphonso Pinkney. Peace out.